Why can't David, Fraser, McKenzie time travel? Let's talk about it. As always, this will have spoilers for the books and the show, so if you are looking to avoid those, please do keep on scrolling. Now, if you have not read the Outlander novels and are only familiar with the show, then you would not realize that Brianna and Roger are going to have a third child together named Davy. This storyline plays out in the 9th book of the series, Go and Tell the Bees That I Am Gone. Davy's full name is David William, after Brianna's brother William, Ian after young Ian, Fraser McKenzie, and he is born on September 16th in 1780. In the books, we find out that Brianna and Roger decide to go back to America and reunite with Jamie and Claire in their own time, which at that point is 1779. And when they travel through the stones, Brianna ends up having an issue with her heart, which Claire later diagnoses as a heart murmur. Both Brianna and Claire decide that it likely is due to her traveling in such a short amount of time. First to go back and find Roger, and then again shortly thereafter to go forward in time back to Jamie and Claire. But in the same novel, she does end up pregnant again with their third child. Brianna and Roger's oldest son, Jemmy, has the ability to time travel, as we know. He also has what I like to think of as a sonar, where he can feel the location of people close to him, like Mandy or his parents, at great distances. But his distance that he can feel people at is shorter than Mandy's. Mandy shares those same qualities that Jeremiah has, although she can feel people at a much greater distance than him. And in Written in My Own Heart's Blood, Brianna actually tests those theories with Joe Abernathy and figures out that it's up to 4 miles away. Mandy also has the ability to see people's auras, and we do see that in Go and Tell the Bees That I Am Gone, because she's actually able to see the aura of her younger brother, Davy. In the books, she actually tells Jamie that Davy's aura and Jamie's aura are the same. She describes it as water-like, and she doesn't necessarily know what it means, but she does have the ability to recognize auras in people. Mandy was also instrumental in pulling the McKenzie family through time once they were in the stones and finding Jamie. And she actually calls out his name and is able to pull their whole family through time to the right year because of her abilities. Many people do think she may develop the healing gene as well, since she can see auras. It is believed that because both of their parents have the time-traveling gene, that these two have amplified powers for that reason. So why then is their newest addition to the family, their younger brother Davy, unable to time travel? Some of the information about this can be found in the Outlandish companion novels, volumes 1 and 2, which Diana wrote to give book readers and fans of Outlander a little bit more insight into some of the hard-hitting questions about the series. One of those topics is whether or not the ability to time travel is something genetic, which she explains in this paragraph here and the subsequent pages. In this passage, Diana explains that we assume that the time travel gene is dominant, meaning that only one of your parents has to have that gene in order to pass it on to the child. She goes on to explain that if Brianna is the descendant of a traveler and a non-traveler, meaning Claire and Jamie, that means she only has one allele to pass on to her children as opposed to 2. But as we know, even though Brianna only has one parent that has the time-traveling gene, it is expressed in her genetics. That means that she also possesses one time-traveling gene and one non-time-traveling gene that she can pass on to her own children. Whether the child gets the time-traveling gene or not is completely random and not something that can be predicted. This chart here explains Brianna and Roger and how their traits could be theoretically passed on to their children. The key being, if they have 4 children, likely 3 of them will be time travelers and 1 of them won't. This is from Outlandish Companion Volume 1, so here she explores the possibility of Brianna's baby being that of Stephen Bonnet's, who is not a time traveler, and what that would look like if she had a child with a non-time traveler. The odds would then look like 1 in 2 or 50-50. The other component here is that we do not know if Roger received his time-traveling gene from one or both of his parents. If it's from both, then he has the genotype TT. That would mean that all of their children, regardless, would have the time-traveling gene. And since Davy is born without it, we know that Roger's only parent that could time travel was his father. So in Go and Tell the Bees That I Am Gone, when Brianna gives birth to Davy, and Mandy is able to see that his aura is red like Jamie's, who is a non-time traveler, they infer that that means that Davy did not get either of the traits from Roger or Bree. Now, this is significant for two reasons. Brianna, Roger, and their family would not leave Davy in that time if he cannot travel with them. So it essentially traps them or keeps them anchored in this timeline, although their children, if they grow up and want to, are able to travel back to their own time in the future. Brianna's heart condition is also a factor in her not traveling again, and both her and Claire in the books recognized that they likely would die if they tried to travel once more because their bodies would not be able to handle being inside of the stones and the portal through time. I do hope that season 8 of Outlander touches upon Davy, sees Davy show up in some capacity, but more importantly, I hope they elaborate on the powers that both Jemmy and specifically Mandy have, given that both of their parents are time travelers, and likely their powers are amplified more so than Claire, Bree, or Roger's. Separate from the shows, it's implied heavily that in Book 10 that will be something that will be explored in greater detail, and we will learn more about Mandy and Jem's powers along with what's going on with Davy and obviously Brianna and her heart condition. It is also important to note that even though Jamie cannot time travel, and we know his aura does not suggest that he is a time traveler, he does have the ability to astral project, and that's something that I do hope that the books and the show provide a lot more clarity on as we wrap up the story of Jamie and Claire. In the books, we also see how Jamie is an amplifier for Claire's powers, specifically in Go and Tell the Bees That I Am Gone, where her healing powers start to come into play again, something that was mentioned earlier on in the storyline, and Claire is starting to come into her full power by Book 9. We actually saw this in season 2 of the show when Claire is in France and Master Raymond comes to save her and heal her, and he asks Claire to draw upon Jamie by calling out to him. Master Raymond is someone who saw Jamie's red aura and I think can tell that he amplifies Claire's powers in some way. So Jamie may not be able to time travel, but he's not insignificant in terms of his own powers. Whether or not he learns how to tap into them or even control them is a mystery at this point, and I hope they cover that in Book 10.